Hi, you're listening to Dusk to Dawn, reading horror and weird fiction. We're your hosts, Amber and Dan. Read the episode's book first if you don't want any spoilers, because we're full of them.
We also talk about sensitive topics. This is a horror podcast after all, and we swear a lot. Well, Amber does. Find any trigger warnings in our episode notes. We're happy you're joining us, and enjoy the show. Welcome to episode 11 of the podcast. We're in the closing minutes of the season here. We got 3 books left, and this is one of them, The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. Take it away, Amber.
You sound like an announcer.
A broadcaster would be a better term for this.
Oh, God.
I'm going to get all basketball because I know so much about it.
Oh, yeah. Should I be wearing my Warriors hat?
No. You should be wearing a Lady Grizz hat, but you don't know what that is. And I
Yes, I do.
Oh, you did some research too? Okay. All right. Tell us about the author. We'll talk about Lady Grizz later.
Okay, so our author for this podcast book is Stephen Graham Jones. You've probably already heard of him. He's pretty prolific in the horror genre, and he's been around for a while. So Stephen Graham Jones is a member of the Blackfeet Nation and a prolific writer who has authored over 25 books, hundreds of short stories, and comic books. He is the winner of 4 Bram Stoker Awards, 2 Shirley Jackson Awards, and the Ray Bradbury Prize, among others. I should have looked at this before, but he might have more Bram Stoker Awards than Stephen King.
Oh, wow. That's crazy and not surprising at all because his writing is much better.
Anyway.
I'm sorry, Stephen King fans. He's very entertaining and
I'm
a great
a Stephen
storyteller.
King fan. We've read Stephen King.
I'm not sorry for you.
I was just circling
You
back.
like trash.
You are trash. He currently is the Baldwin Professor of English at the University of Colorado in Boulder. I lied. Stephen King has 12 Bram Stoker Awards.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just mean and incorrect now.
But 4 is still very impressive. And he actually won a Stephen Graham Jones Award. Maybe someday. He won
I hope he would.
He won a Bram Stoker Award for this book. This was his second one. The one that he had mentioned in his about the author section in this book. He says he has 1. And then he actually ended up winning 2 in the year that this book came out, The Only Good Indians. He won it for this and a long fiction, Night of the Mannequins, which I actually read while reading this. And then the next year he won one for My Heart is a Chainsaw. And he's been nominated for a couple of others as well. So that's just cool.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the Blackfeet Nation, not only because Stephen Graham Jones is a member of it, but also because the characters in our book are, at least most of the characters.
There's a crow.
There is a crow, and there's a white girl, and a little more than that.
I was talking about other...
I'm just talking about not Blackfeet Nation. So
I was talking about other Indian tribes.
Yeah, but our 4 main characters are of the Blackfeet Nation, and they're an Indian reservation in northwest Montana. It's one of the biggest reservations in the U.S., spanning 1.5 million acres. The Blackfeet tribe has lived in the Rocky Mountains for over 10,000 years, the internet told me, which is just nuts. That's a very long time. That's like pre-agriculture, or like that is agriculture. That's the agriculture time when they woke up and they're like, we can plant shit. But maybe they didn't because they were Indians and they wanted to hunt. I don't know. Anyway.
It's like Clan of the Cave Bear at that point. Were we in Europe yet? Yeah. I mean, like the Celtics and stuff.
10,000 years ago? Yeah. That's when in history books they say agriculture started in Europe.
Just like
and
anywhere.
stuff, right?
There are people everywhere. It's just, it was before white man came in and fucked it all up.
So long. The reservation was established by treaty in 1855. And a cool little fact I came across is that the Blackfeet National Bank opened in 1987 and became the first tribally owned and controlled full-service bank in the U.S. So go bankers, I guess.
Yeah.
But still, that sounds like a cool thing that they should be proud of.
They're one of the larger reservations.
Yeah, one of the biggest.
There. Yeah.
I don't know if that means top 3 or what, but it's a big one.
Size-wise, I don't know, but I know they're not the most, they don't have the highest number of registered members, though. Because that's like the Apache and the Cherokee and stuff. You know, the ones that everyone actually knows the name of.
Yeah.
Because American history, let's just skip all that.
I mean, we could read it too, honestly. Like, we're 40 years old.
I meant in school.
You're not 40 years old.
Not yet.
Speaking of, I did use the term Indian. So let's talk about how we're going to be talking about our characters and the culture in this podcast.
We thought it would be important to address using the term Indian because I know that in some cases it can be offensive to people, or they prefer being called Native Americans or Indigenous or
American Indian.
American Indian, First Americans, First Nations, Native peoples. There's a lot of different terms out there, and we want to be respectful to all people, just not the assholes.
Yeah, fuck you, assholes.
But the point being is that we don't want to offend anyone by using the term Indian and American Indian, but we decided that that's what we're going to go with, mainly because that's what Stephen Graham Jones uses in the book. And in
interviews too. Yeah.
And in interviews. So we're talking about him and his book. So we figure we'll use the term that he seems to be most comfortable with.
Yeah. And because these kind of things can be complex, it seems like a good way to approach these kinds of things would be to see how a person presents themselves, right? Because one Native American might prefer the term Indian or prefer just being called by their tribe or whatever it is, and different generations have different feelings about that. You know what we're saying. Context is important. We're not trying to offend anyone. We're just going to use Graham's choice of word here.
Yeah. And it's funny because I also thought of, so when I was in graduate school just a couple years ago, a lot of times you get in presentations and stuff, people would mention like recognizing that like we're on native lands and naming all the tribes and stuff of like the local area where you are in recognition. And I thought of doing that, but then I also remembered that recently that's kind of been questioned.
Yeah, because you're like saying all that stuff on colonized, taken land. So what does it really mean?
As a colonizer, and it's like,
it just makes you feel good. And it's respectful, of course, not to diss it.
But so just, you know, I thought of it and then I said, you know what, let's just not. You can go online and find out the tribes that are the historical lands that you might be living on. And I suggest doing that because that's part of your history of where you live. So
yeah, no,
but it's not up to us.
I'm kind of ashamed now because this book was like a really cool look into modern Indian culture a little bit.
Yes, and we have seen a little bit of that. We've driven through reservations and stuff. So that's where my mind's eye goes to when I think of what reservation life looks like, literally passing through. Like I didn't stop and say, hey, let me learn about your life.
I don't think they would have liked that.
No, exactly. That's exactly. So, you know, very outsider. And then also, you know, in California, you get all the, well, here too, in Oregon and Washington, the casinos, which is, you know, outward presenting. But so we as West Coasterners have been definitely exposed to some forms of limited forms of Native American culture, but we're not by any means experts or claim to be. So
how about for the segue into the book itself, why don't you read the little poem that says the title of the book in it?
Yeah, so the title of the book is The Only Good Indians. And this actually stems from a historical slang against Native American people. So at one point in the book, it's quoted at Denora, who is one of the main characters, talks about how she's expecting to hear this at a basketball game because of the racism around sports and stuff. And I'm sure we'll get to that. But anyway, here's the poem. Or I guess it's not a poem. It's kind of a chant or I don't know. Is it a racist chant?
Well, I would think so because it's she describes it as being as a basketball game. So maybe it started as a poem or whatever, but I would imagine it as them chanting it. You don't have to if you don't feel like it.
No, I'm not going to chant. Okay, so, and of course the first line, No, never mind. I'm not
It's
going
a
to
Star
say.
Trek line, right?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
what? Why would you not say that? This is who you are.
I feel like it, I know. Like my first thought was like, oh, it's a good day to die. And I was like, oh, yes, it is a good day to die. And then I kept reading and being like, oh, shit, actually, this feels disrespectful to bring up Klingons in this context. But anyway, it's a good day to die. I will fight no more forever. The only good Indian is a dead Indian. Kill the Indian, save the man. Bury the hatchet, off the reservation. Indian go home. No Indians or dogs allowed.
Yeah, I bet that really made young Indian basketball players feel great.
I think this was a
But
saying
it also
though, before
steeled their reserve to get to those finals.
But what I was trying to say before is that I think this stems from earlier in American history. Like it's been around longer than just an anti-Indian basketball thing.
Oh yeah, I'm sure this goes back.
Yeah, so that's not how the book starts. That part is like at least halfway through the book.
Yeah, it's just a good segue to kind of set the scene.
Yeah, and it does bring up a lot of what this book tackles, which is racism, sports, life on the reservation, racism against Native Americans. Did I just say that?
Yep.
Okay.
Except this book is Kill the Indian, Save the Elk.
Yes.
You should put that in a post. Wait, actually don't.
Yeah.
On second thought.
That's how we get a lot of attention.
All right, let's move things along.
Want.
Let's set the scene with the book summary. A group of friends from the Blackfeet Nation trespasses into the elder section of the reservation hunting grounds to pursue a herd of elk. They open fire, killing a large number of them, including a mother pregnant with a calf. This act of trespass leads to dire consequences that follow the four friends for the rest of their lives. Also, there's basketball. We should say the four friends' names are Cass, Lewis, Ricky, and Gabe. Hey, I got it. I didn't even look.
Let me just interject. So, and it's important also to remember in this that they're hunting off season. It's just before Thanksgiving. So it's the end of the season. The fact that a elk is pregnant with a calf is incredibly unusual. And it's the end of the hunting season. So they're desperate to get that last kill before the season's over and done with. So they're willing to go outside of the normal regulated area.
Yeah, and seeing this herd of elk here is, unheard of. It doesn't happen that often, except for one significant time next to a passing train. The fact that they have the chance to nab 8 or 9 hides or that much meat, and the hides and the trophies and the pride that comes with all that, especially for these young men, is huge. I want to talk about 2 things that I caught in an interview with Stephen Graham Jones, or that I read. I didn't give the interview, that helped inspire the story that I thought was really interesting. So first of all, when we first meet one of the characters, Lewis, he's in an apartment living with a white girl, and they've been in a relationship for a little while, and they're off the reservation, but they're dealing with a spotlight on the top of the ceiling that flickers on and off, and no matter how...
They're married.
They're married? Oh, yeah. Okay, they're married. But anyway, so they have this issue with a spotlight that keeps flickering on and off no matter what they try to do. They can't get it to be fixed or turn on or off at will. That's a real thing that happened to Stephen Graham Jones. In a house that he moved into with his wife, there's a spotlight, and they're that would just flicker on and off randomly, and they could not figure it out. So that's just a small little thing. A bigger thing that's really cool is he had a hunting experience when he was younger with, I believe, one of his uncles. He said they were crawling in the grass because they saw at the top of a grassy slope just kind of like a brown hump, and they thought it was a cow elk. So they got down on the ground and sneakily crawled up to it for 45 minutes. And then when they were 30 yards away from it, it stood up, and it was a grizzly bear with her cubs.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. Luckily, the bear and the cubs didn't see them and went down the other side of the slope. And then what's super interesting is he was terrified looking through the scope of his rifle, and then it turned black because his uncle cupped the scope and pushed the gun down. And what he said, the characters in this book didn't have that mentor, didn't have the person to be don't do this, stand down, which has huge repercussions, which we'll get to. So, yeah.
I guess that shows the importance of being downwind, right? Because I think bears have pretty good sense of smell.
I would imagine
So
they had that
the
down.
bear like left, because with cubs, I mean, you're fucked if the bear senses you're that close. That's crazy.
Yeah, really crazy.
Also, I know that he goes back annually for the summer powwow and the annual, I think it's in September, they have a elk hunt. I think that annual elk hunt also was inspiration for this book.
And that's really cool too, because he does not live on the Blackfeet tribe reservation. He's in Colorado.
And he was born in Texas. He was not born on the reservation.
Yeah, and we see a lot of that in this book. We have some characters, two of the friends are still on the reservation. The other two have left. And why don't we talk about the first friend, Ricky, and what happens with him? Because that kind of opens up the book.
That's why it's called a prologue.
Oh, shit. That's what those are for. I thought that was just for fantasy. No,
it's the prologue. So the prologue takes us to a dive bar with I thought of
a hoot and toot dive bar.
Yeah, my first thought went to True Blood. I know it's very different horror genre, but the bar that Sookie works at, that's like what I envisioned for the bar that Ricky comes out of. But it's this rootin' tootin' dive bar, as you so put it. And there's a big like parking lot outside with just a bunch of trucks. Ricky realizes that he is the only Indian.
There's one other sitting in the corner, and they kind of give like a slight nod to each other.
Okay. So there's one other Indian in this place, and he has to go to the bathroom. He can't wait in line. He's really drunk, and he's like, fuck it, I'll just go outside and pee, because, and the bouncer's like, if you leave, you're not going to get back in because there's a wait.
Yeah, there's a wait, and it's all these white workers. It's all these white workers who are like, if like we should be in there before this Indian should be in there. So if he gets up, one of these guys is going to push his way in and take his spot. Yeah. We also quick mention that everybody there is working on some kind of a dig site. I forgot. Do you remember?
Yeah, it was mining, isn't it?
Yeah, he's leaving the reservation, and his plan is to go somewhere they mentioned, but I can't remember. But he's leaving the reservation, but he needs some funds on the way, so he goes to this mining site and offers his labor with a plan to take his first paycheck and move on.
He was hired on a drilling crew in North Dakota.
There we go.
So anyway, he leaves, goes to go pee, and sees this elk around the cars, and it's like freaking out and bashing into the cars, and he's like, ah, shit, this thing is crazy, first of all. And second of all, these white dudes are going to come out and see some Indian out here, and think that I'm beating the shit out of their cars. And he was right. They did come out and think it was him. So a bunch of white dudes are chasing him down, and he's joking about how fast Indians are, and he'll be able to get away because white guys are slow. And then he has this weird encounter where there's a herd of elk, and he gets stuck between the herd of elk and this mob of white guys that are coming after him. It takes me a second to get used to Jones's writing style, and I don't know exactly what it is, but it takes me a minute to like warm up to understanding his writing style. And I didn't understand this at first. I was like, wait, there's a wall of elk? Like what? And it makes sense to me now. Like I think he just realized like, I can't run into this herd of elk. They'll kill me. But if I turn around, the white guys will kill me. The prologue does end kind of on a cliffhanger of whether or not he will, what happens to him.
No, he's dead, dude.
Well, I know he's dead, but they say that after the fact. Like I think Lewis brings it up. Like, oh yeah, 10 years ago when Ricky was killed. Yeah. But the prologue itself leaves it on a cliffhanger with a newspaper article like another dead Indian.
Yeah, it was a really cool scene because like with the elk bashing all the trucks and stuff, and then he takes like a lug wrench or some kind of wrench out of a cab of a truck to fight off the elk. But then, like, as he's swinging at it, he's hitting other trucks with it. So when these like cowboys come up and they see him, he's, has a wrench in his hand.
And he's clearly drunk.
Yeah. And he's got a wrench in his hand. And I think they like see him swing at the elk, which I'm guessing they can't see or whatever, and like smash one of the trucks. So they're like, this guy just came out here and fucked up all our trucks. So what are they going to do? They should talk diplomatically.
Oh yeah,
That's what they should do, but that's not what happened.
No, but they beat him to death. That's what they actually do.
So this is like, this is a strong opening. It's funny because Amber had started reading it before I did, and she had said like the prose is a little tricky. So when I actually thankfully read the prologue twice, because my first time I was like, oh, it is. It's not different. It's just like it's a very unique stylistic cadence. It's one of those things where you kind of have to like twist your brain a little bit to get used to it. But once I read it a second time, I had no problem throughout the rest of the book.
Yeah, and once it clicks, it's easy reading. It's not like it's hard to read. It's just
different from your typical cadence.
Yeah, which is awesome, and I think that's why so many people love his work, because it's unique in his own way.
So this sets the whole scene already. We have this character leaving the reservation, trying to make it on their own, and then, literally having that just be stomped into the ground and like completely failing. So then we move 10 years forward.
By a bunch of white guys, which is historically accurate.
Yeah. So we move forward. It's 10 years later. Not to like recap the whole book or anything, but we have the 3 other friends of this group of 4 friends. And we next move on to Lewis. And he's living with his wife, who is a white PETA.
And she's vegetarian.
Yeah, and she's like a really good runner, like runs all the time, is like a sprinter, is like really good shape and seems really cool. And it's funny because like Gabe and Cass who are still on the reservation and like the other Indians who stayed there are kind of like, okay, he went away with a white woman. He'll be back on the reservation in a year or two, like when she gets tired of playing Dr. Quinn and Medicine Woman. Is that right?
Yes, I loved that show as a kid. I wonder if it's as bad. I wonder if it's really bad now. I remember enjoying it as a kid. Better than John Wayne movies.
You can still enjoy something with issues. I don't know. I haven't seen it, so that could sound bad in modern text. Anyway, but they don't, they have regular relationship strains or whatever, but they seem like they have a solid relationship and that it's real, which is cool because that's right away one of the many ways Stephen Graham Jones kind of pushes against the stereotypes that both non-Indians and Indians have about each other.
Yeah, his friends comment a lot on like, he ran off the reservation with his white woman. But then Lewis, multiple times, relatively frequently when he's talking about PETA, he mentions how she accepts all his Indian ways and the things that he talks about without judgment, without trying to inject herself into his thoughts or whatever. She's just like, okay, whatever. And I think at one point he says like, yeah, she even lets me hang all my Indian shit on the walls.
Except for his Indian blanket, which gives me an intro to a quote I got right here.
Oh, perfect.
So he's talking about how good it is, but there's always the tug, especially when you leave a culture you're so strongly a part of. Like, how do you honor it, or how does it stay with you?
I don't think he is leaving the culture. I think
that's true. Well, it's complicated when you leave, right? Yeah. I would assume. So one of the cool things about Lewis is he like often has thoughts in the form of a newspaper headline. Here's a part where you really see the juxtaposition of how he wants to stay connected to his Indian roots and also just like living in the modern world and being a guy, right? Like he's been doing for years, he imagines the headline on the Glacier Reporter back home. Former basketball star can't even hang graduation blanket in own home. Never mind that it's not because PETA draws the line at full-sized blankets, but more because he used it for padding around a free dishwasher he was bringing home a couple of years ago, and the dishwasher tumped over in the bed of the truck on the very last turn spilled cloddy rancid gunk directly into Hudson's Bay. So this could easily have been like, oh, she draws the line at me hanging the Indian blanket and that causes issues. But I like how he adds in like, well, it's also because he used it for the practical use of doing some work around the house, right?
And it smells like shit.
Yeah. But it makes it feel more modern in terms of course, these things are important to them, but they're also just moving through life, and it's not everything is utterly sacred, right?
Well, like building a sweat house with a Star Wars sleeping bag.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I was like, man, that might be vintage. Anyway, sorry, a tangent there. So Lewis is our main character for quite a while, and we get his perspective on leaving the reservation, and he works at USPS. He works with this other Indian woman, but she's Crow, and so they joke with each other about, how they should be enemies kind of thing. At one point in the story, after Lewis starts seeing the elk, which is like haunting him, it seems like he snaps, and it's interesting because I was reading The Night of the Mannequins as a break from reading Moby Dick, and that has a completely different premise than this book, but it just so happened that I was reading it like at this part with Lewis, and it worked really well to help me question reality in a sense with what was going on with Lewis, because he sees this elk and it keeps haunting and it keeps coming back, and he starts to believe that Shani is his coworker, that she is the elk in spirit. And so he causes, quote unquote, an accident that kills her, where basically he turns on his motorcycle and it catches her hair in the spokes and she's scalped, and then it crushes her skull.
So crazy.
And I was just like, yes. Like, I think this was the first vivid murder description in the book, and I was like, here we go. Thank you Jones.
Yeah, after
get me out of this weird fiction, get back into the like gory horror.
Yeah, following our last episode, Short Stay in Hell, which was very cool but more philosophical, Amber made it very clear that she wanted some horror, and she's getting it.
Yeah, so this was great. So, and I love he explains the detail where, because the wheel's spinning, right, and the tire's spinning, it shoots her blood in like a line across the garage. It makes like this line. It splits the room in half, basically. And I have a quote for this. There's bright red aerated blood, a splattery stripe bisecting the garage, going from floor to wall to ceiling, then down the other wall again. It's a line between who Lewis used to be and who he is now. He stands, pushes the button on the wall. It's time to lower the door on all this. So pushing the button on the wall means he closed the garage door. So he did this with the garage door wide open, by the way. And the cops were just at his house, like, earlier in the day or the day before, and said they were going to come back. So like, clearly this is kind of crazy. And then he ends up actually accidentally scaring Peta while she's up on the ladder looking at the light. While he's out in the garage, he's like covered in blood, comes inside. She's like up on the ladder.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, you fixed the light. Oh my gosh, why are you covered in blood? He's like, oh, it's grease. And then I think because he startles her, she falls, tries to catch herself, bashes her head on the fireplace, and dies. She's like basically laying there twitching, staring at him.
And then he pulls all her teeth out because he wants to see if she's an elk.
Yes. So at this point, I'm like, okay, the rest of this book is Lewis is going to be a fucking serial killer. He's just going to go around killing people, because he pulls out the teeth to see if any of them are ivory, because that would indicate that she was an elk. And then he notices something in her stomach is moving, cuts her open, and pulls out a baby elk out of her womb. And I'm like, okay, this guy is clearly fucking delusional. There's no way that could happen. And then he takes this elk and he's like, well, I guess I better go back to the reservation. And he's carrying this elk. And I'm like, okay, well, he's clearly lost his mind. This is going to be quite the book. But now this is halfway through the book, and we've had Lewis as our narrator for quite some time now, and they kill him. The police, or the state police, kill him on the ridge. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? You just killed off your main protagonist halfway through the book? Fuck yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it's really
great.
cool too, because Shaney, his coworker who gets scalped in the motorcycle, they definitely have like a little bit of sexual tension, even though Lewis is married. At least he's like
married.
tries to be really he tries to be really careful about her, but there is a little bit of like a little flirtation going on, at least on her part, because she's Crow. He kind of talks about how like, well, you know, working there, everyone sees like, oh, the two Indians, so like they try to match us together like furniture or something, right? So he's a little bit resistant to that, but they still do strike up a friendship, and she ends up sharing his passion for reading. Like he's just into like pulp novels, like pulp horror novels and stuff. I'm sure Jones enjoyed writing that part, and she borrows books from him and stuff. But before he kills her and they're just like friends, he starts thinking like, oh, she must be this elk that he's been seeing and causing these issues. But as the reader, it's in a way where it sounds like he's really paranoid, because he's like, well, she borrowed a book, but she brought it back, but she couldn't have had enough time to read that many books. So maybe she's just doing this to try and seem like a human, but she's actually an elk. And then he kills her and you still don't know, has he just totally lost it?
Yeah, we never know if she was
and then he dies
elk or not. There definitely is something to be said for them being the only two Indians, because he does open up to her about his experience with the killing the elk that Dan summarized in the beginning.
But
which is
to
haunting
Shaney,
him.
he never told PETA the whole story.
No, and he ends up telling Shaney the whole story, and then, you know, she's comforting him, and PETA comes home. She's like, oh, okay, that's awkward. So what is the whole story? Because that's actually kind of the whole basis of this book, right? What happens? So they kill the elk, and Lewis is the one who shot the mom.
Yeah, and it's like graphically, like he shot her in the back, like in the spine, blew her legs out, like, you know, a harmful shot.
Goes to cut her up, or to clean her, I guess it's called. It's different when it's an animal, but to clean his kill and skin her, and notices that her stomach is moving. Lo and behold, she has a baby elk in her, and then like the mom sits up and like turns to face him, and he's like, you should be dead. Shoots her in the face, and she's still like, ah.
Yeah. Then it's like really cold. It's snowing, and you know they're all.
Yeah, it's right before Thanksgiving in Montana, so yes, it's cold.
Yeah, and they're all starting to get paranoid about like not being in the right section,
getting caught by the game warden. Yeah,
but Lewis is like, we're taking this young elk like no matter what. Like
the skin.
Sorry, yeah, we're taking the skin no matter what, almost because like he feels really bad about it, and he's like, I won't let this go to waste. And so it has a pretty moving scene of like them getting it back up in the truck and getting out of there. But it's like, obviously that this has ended poorly for them.
Yeah. And it haunts him. It haunts him so much that he's starting to think that this elk is following him around. The mother elk is following him around, and he has the skin in his freezer, and like Shady won't touch it, and he's like, oh, see, it's your skin, you won't touch it.
Yeah, that's another cool thing, kind of like the blanket, where he does have the hide that he skinned on that day, but it's not like he did a pristine job and he's taking really good care of it. Like he did it because he needed it, but it's wrapped up in the freezer, has freezer burn, is like pretty patchy and stuff. So
yeah, his knife wasn't very sharp, but it's like a cultural thing. So yeah, it's cool to see how that played into, is this psychosis? And that's why I brought up Night of the Mannequin, because if you haven't read that, you should. It's very good. It's basically I don't want to ruin it because we're not talking about it, but it's another one of his, and it has that same kind of who's right, what's the state of mind of the main character, and like what does that do to the story. Again, fabulous writing. So moving on.
Yeah, so I think we can kind of go a little more quickly over what it turns into. So at this point, it's so cool, like Amber said, like the character we thought was going to be the main character after Ricky died in the prologue dies halfway through the book. And that's just, I mean, I just love those kind of movies and stories where the main track of it just like comes to a halt and you're like, what the heck? I get like a second story out of this. So it moves on to Gabe and Cass. the other two main friends of this group who still do live on the reservation. And it follows their life and their relationships.
Well, it focuses on, they're going to have a sweat.
Yeah, well, you want to go into that a little bit?
That's like the rest of the story. It's
so why are they doing this?
They're doing this.
And what is it?
They're doing this in honor of their friend Lewis getting killed. So Cass is technically the one putting on the sweat, and he's getting paid by a reservation officer, Victor, to have his son join the sweat. And his son's name is Nathan Yellowtail, and he was joining the sweat because his brother died.
No, his I think it was a really good friend or a best friend.
Yeah, I think, his best friend died. And so the point of a sweat is to, don't quote me on this, I'm not an expert, but this is what I did a little research. And I believe one of the main purposes of a sweat is to honor the dead. If you don't know what it is already, it's similar to a sauna or Turkish bath. What they do is they build a structure, and then they have a fire outside that heats up rocks to like very, very hot rocks, almost like coals. And then you bring in the rocks and it creates heat, and you pour water on it and it creates steam, and it just makes it incredibly hot, like a Turkish sauna, if you want to compare it to other regions. And this is something that has been practiced all over the world, but like in this specific context, in Native American culture at least, it's like in this structure with hot rocks, and it's a spiritual thing. I had a whole thing here.
And then they sit crisscross applesauce around it. I think, I don't know, maybe they
I don't think it matters how they sit. I think there's a lot of laying down and just sitting however, you're like you just are surviving in there because it's so hot. It's hard to breathe. When I was doing some research, I saw there was, I think in the 80s or the 90s, there was like a new age wave of stupid white people who were putting on quote unquote sweats, and people were paying a ton of money, and at least one person was jailed for like people dying in sweats because they did it wrong.
Overheated or something?
Well, they didn't
drink enough water or whatever.
They didn't have like the cultural understanding of like how to properly do this, and like
sounds like something white people would do.
It's crazy. Yeah, like you have to have, from what I read, you have to have like new rocks. It can't have been used before because they might crack. You have to make sure that the water's good because you're creating steam off of it, so you don't want to like poison the air. You have to be aware enough of the people in there that they're not going to pass out and die. It's a whole thing, and it sounds really fascinating. But in this case, it's funny because Cass is building this sweat out of old sleeping bags and stuff, and Gabe's giving him shit for like, oh wow, this is really traditional, isn't it? Like sleeping bags, and his bucket of water is like what the dogs would drink out of. And Gabe's like, yeah, I'd rather be thirsty than drink. I have standards,
Another interesting point is that Yellowtail, who's joining them in this sweat, is of a younger generation and seems like, I don't know if he's hesitant about doing it, but Cass and Gabe are definitely kind of there. It sounds like they have done this before to coach this next generation of Indian through the process by, making sure he drinks enough water and saying like, get down low to the ground where it's cooler if you start to feel overwhelmed. So there's a little bit of that mentoring, even though it's done in a very like casual modern way where they're joking around and aren't even sure if they're doing it totally correctly. It's still very important to them.
Well, it wasn't Cass's uncle, an elder, that would do these, so he was learning from family.
Yeah, I think so.
So again, it was passed down knowledge. So yeah, it might be not a traditional building for it, but
yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning too that I think it's implied, if not directly stated, that Yellowtail has drug abuse problems or his friend died from overdose. I can't remember if it said explicitly or implied.
It's not Nathan Yellowtail. No, he does not.
His friend then I think perhaps overdosed And that echoes Ricky, the first character we ran into who died at the bar. Part of the reason he was leaving is that his younger brother overdosed and like died on the couch. So this is a little bit, it does bring that theme. And so here Nathan Yellowtail is there mourning his friend who had the same thing happen to him and trying to, honor him, but also get through it himself. I feel like part of the sweat is, in addition to honoring your ancestors, purging some of your own demons. I don't know if that's true, but
I
kind of got that feeling.
That. Yeah, it's a mixture. But I think the main reason that they put it on was to honor their friends.
Yeah.
I think that Jones does a really good job of injecting the real social issues that Indian reservations deal with, which is poverty, drug abuse, alcoholism. Cass is an alcoholic. And is it?
Yeah, I think
it's Gabe.
Okay.
Gabe is an alcoholic, and he's ostracized from his wife and daughter, and his daughter Denora becomes a main character. But she's like, oh, my dad's a drunk. He can't come to my basketball games because he tried to attack someone. And these are real issues. There are a high percentage of people who deal with this stuff on a regular basis. And that's just the state of life on a lot of reservations, as far as we've been told. Again, I'm not going to assume I know. So I really like how he puts these serious topics in, and in some ways jokes about it and makes it a little light with, the sleeping bags and stuff.
Yeah, so I think we can say, without like giving up the whole story, that like everything kind of culminates into the Sweat Lodge experience, where the remaining two of the four friends, Cass and Gabe, are at this location with a couple other people, because Yellowtail's dad is the cop who's there, who's like helping tend the fire with the rocks and stuff. But that's the climactic scene where things come to a head with our elk demon known as Elk Head Woman, which he almost named the book murder. Elk Head Woman. What?
Oh, I was just saying there's a lot of murder here.
Yeah, there's a lot of murder here. A lot of really cool things happen. I think we can kind of leave that open and instead talk, and not instead, but like shift it over to Denora a little bit, because she's a main character.
Interesting. I call her Denora.
Well, the thing is, they say that she was supposed to be called Deborah, but but the joke, or whether or not it's true or not, was like her dad had like bad handwriting, so it came out as Denora. So because of that, I think say it like Deborah, but Denora.
Yeah,
I don't know. That was my take.
In my brain, I read it as Denora, but me, I always make things
just
weird.
Make shit up.
I just say weird shit. I don't know. Okay, well, let's go with Denora then. Wait, is that what you said?
Denora. Okay. I know.
Let's go with Denora.
Yeah. You want to start?
Yeah,
start off with her? Okay, so whose kid is she, first of all?
Gabe.
Gabe's kid. Okay. So she's Gabe's daughter. She's in high school, and she's like a really good basketball player. And
like they're thinking she's going to be it.
Yeah, and this is really cool. Jones had also mentioned, not so much as inspiration for the story, but that he had always wanted to write kind of a basketball heavy theme in a story. And apparently he has another one where he talked about basketball, but wasn't satisfied with it, and is here. And I will say, as someone who only like sparingly watches games when other people put them on, and I enjoy it, and I like playing basketball in the driveway with my son. But as someone who's not super into basketball, at no time did I feel like, oh, okay, it's like the basketball part. And there are basketball parts, but he writes it in like a really cool way. And he's more interested in that driveway game, or like 1-on-1, 21-point jump shot, kind of more personal gaming anyway. And it comes across in his writing, and it's really well done.
I'm going to interrupt you because we just recently saw a movie, and there was a preview, and it looked like it was going to be an American football movie with a yay, go team, like Friday Night Lights or whatever. And then it turned into a really gory horror film. Do you remember that?
Oh, I forgot the name of it. It looked cool.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that with the basketball thing. Like, no, it's not going to become like a woohoo sports thing.
I'll say real quick before I hand it back over to you that I don't know if Dinner was based off this person, but there is a parallel in real life with her character, at least in terms of being a young basketball star. There was a real person named Malia Kipp, who was a trailblazing Native American athlete and registered nurse from the Blackfeet Nation in Montana. And she was the first Montana tribal member to receive a full ride scholarship to play NCAA Division I women's basketball. She played for the Lady Grizz team at the University of Montana from 1992 to 1996 and inspired other Indian basketball players to follow in her footsteps, which is really cool. And I can't imagine that Jones didn't have that in his mind when he was writing that character.
Well, and there's a PBS documentary out about her too that we need to watch.
But let's refocus on Denner. What's her deal?
So she's really interesting because she, again, brings the modern take to this. She's young. She rolls her eyes at her drunk dad and wants to use basketball as a way to get out of the reservation and to do her tribe proud. She has these visions in her head of going to college basketball and having, her tribe's flag on her back and being and she knows she's good. Everyone knows she's very, very good at basketball.
And one of the cool things when we first learn about her is her experiences at school are really interesting because she talks about how there was a project where, I don't know, they have to draw or do something to honor a holiday, everyone in the class to honor a holiday that's important to their culture. And what she ends up doing is doesn't she draw her sister or something? Yeah, she draws her sister
at a basketball tournament in college, I think.
Yeah, who also played right at the perfect goofy angle of a jump shot that had kind of an awkward form to it that her sister's this is incredible. And the teacher, her white teacher responds with shouldn't you have done something a little closer to your heritage? Thinking of probably this isn't very Indian, but basketball to Jones as well as to these characters is a huge part of their life. And it's no, this is Indian just because it's not
a
baskets
powwow.
And teepees and
I think she said don't you want to write about your powwow or something? It's no, this is important to my family. This event was important to my family, so that's what I'm doing. So yeah, the racism there. So
back to how does her encounter how does she kind of come to a head at the Sweat Lodge without giving too much away?
Yeah, so she becomes our final girl. Basically.
Finals girls, the way he calls her, because the finals in the game is great.
Yeah, which brings up a number of things. Obviously, that's a trope in horror and says a lot about women. And he uses this also as a message and a reminder about the violence against Native women, which is a huge issue. If you haven't heard about it, you've been living under a rock. But the rates of abuse against Native women is astronomically higher than any other demographic. It's so tragic. And he even says in his acknowledgments, he mentions, he's thanking everyone and all his influences. And he mentions a woman in Dear Woman from the show Master of Horror. And he says, I really liked how that woman kicked whoever needed kicking in that story. I want that for all Indian women. I also want them all to live too, please. Some of them are my sisters, my nieces, and all of them are my cousins, my aunts. And so he uses Denera as a bit.
Denera.
Is that what I said, right?
Yeah,
well, that's why I said it weird because I was trying to think of it. Okay. But
we'll call her Denny.
Yeah, we'll call her Den. He uses her as a magnifying glass, and she's not I'm not trying to say she's used as a beacon of she's abused or anything like that, but she becomes the final girl against Elkhead woman. Deerhead woman. What is that? she also is the one who ends up breaking the cycle of murder. And she's the one who says enough's enough and brings the story to its conclusion. So she's a very powerful character for someone so young. She's got potential. She's kind of has this idea that it might be, and her dad does too. It seems like a lot of people see her as like a way that might bring good things to the reservation. And
yeah,
she
and
follows
inspiration
through.
and just focused. And,
yes. So
and it's
she's
cool.
a great character.
Another thing that's cool is like when I was reading about Malia Kipp, the real life figure, is that like when she would go play at games, of course, like members from her tribe would come, but when she'd play away games, members from other tribes would come and support her, which she said was huge for her. And without going into like exactly what happens in the final confrontation, another really cool thing Jones does here, and I love this because I'm kind of iffy on slashers, because it essentially turns into
Just
like,
you wait.
I know, I can't wait for you to prove me wrong, but at least in like the slasher movies I've seen, it's like a big hulking figure walks after the final girl and she trips and falls and they like trade damage, and any of her characteristics leading up to then don't really matter for anything, except for, they probably showed that she was physically capable or whatever, but his criticism of the genre is like it just turns into tit for tat fight at the end, where this uses definitely her physical strength and characteristics as an athlete, but also uses her like qualities as a character to overcome the final confrontation, which he specifically did because he felt that in slashers, so much of the character's personality is taken away in the last bit of the story because it turns into a cat and mouse chase. So he handles it really well and in a different way than I see in a lot of slashers.
So I have a quote. Gabriel is really upset at a point during this scene, and I just really, really liked this paragraph. I thought that it really shows you how Stephen Graham Jones writes and how he gets a lot across in a little bit of writing. So, and he's the only one still standing knee deep in it all. He knows he's the one they're going to say did it. Who cares why? Because he's an Indian with a bad track record, because a tribal police officer came out, because he didn't like his other friend's fiance, because his mind boiled out in a sweat, because his murdered friend just got shot, because the great white stepfather stole all their land and fed them bad meat, because the game warden wouldn't let him get his own meat, because his father reported him for stealing a rifle, because the rifle was haunted by war, because he did it all for those reasons and whatever else the newspapers can dream up, unless he runs to the mountains and lives there the old way, never comes back down, even for beer.
Ooh, not even for beer. That's tough.
But maybe just to go to one of his daughter's games. So I just like that because it says so much. He's talking about his bad track record as an Indian, the white man stealing their land,
One of the points that I think this brings up that's really cool is that Stephen Graham Jones has this cool article on Electric Lit called Being Indian is Not a Superpower. And I'll link it in the show notes. But the reason I'm bringing it up is that he says that throughout his writing career, and especially when he was younger too, he would have occasionally get feedback because he would create characters. And the way he described it is he would assume their Indianness. Like he's writing these characters and he's thinking of them as Indian, but he's not, writing about them wearing feathers or doing ceremonies or anything like that. And he would get feedback from his teachers or from the students who would be like, okay, but when are we going to see the Indian shit, basically, right? Like the way he put it is, when is the Indian going to activate? Which is what I think what he means when he's like being Indian is not a superpower. And he addresses this early in the story with Ricky too, because he's talking about how he gets the job on the mining site because the foreman is like, oh, you're an Indian, you won't leave us in the middle of the winter, you can deal with the cold. And he's like, I don't have cold resistance. We just don't complain about it, right? Like I don't have plus cold resist stats. I'm still just a person. Jones comes to the conclusion of like to be a good Indian means to like be happy and do what's right for you. And that might mean staying on the reservation and being part of all that traditional culture. It might mean getting away from that. It might mean somewhere between the two, which sounds like is the case for Jones, who still goes back and participates, but does not live on the reservation. And so ultimately he's like, being an Indian isn't one thing, which you can say about any race, but it's important to state, right? Like, if your question is always why aren't we seeing the Indian stuff? Essentially what you're asking is, well, this character's not white, so you have to explain why. You better have a good reason.
And like, how could you not want to preserve your culture? And it's like, oh, well, fuck you.
I think his point is just that it's complicated, right? Because of that, because you could argue that, and you could also say, well, because it was so destroyed, that's why it's so important that we keep up the traditions that we have to not let it die, right? But you could also have the mind frame of like, I went out of here, and is one better than the other?
Well, there's a lot of issues to stay, right? There's the threat of violence. There's the threat of drug addiction. There's not a whole lot of opportunities depending on what you want to do. But
then if you leave, you're an outsider and you'll be discriminated against. So
and you're giving up your culture. But I mean, there's no right answer for every person in any kind of culture, a cultural identity, like each person's an individual. You have to be able to make your own decisions, and other people need to respect that. And also just mind your own damn business, like, what do you mean, where's the Indian stuff? Yeah. Like, him being an Indian author should be enough. It shouldn't have to be like, oh, well, because I identify as Indian, all my writing has to be Indian. It's like, what? Okay, then then why are all these men writing from a women's perspective? Like, fuck off.
I mean, I will say I liked all the Indian shit in this book, but what was so interesting about it is how modern it felt. Modern in terms of like, they're clearly, even the ones who are still on the reservation with Cass and Gabe, like, they're clearly have each foot is in a different world, like a modern world and the old world, or however you want to call it. And like, that's really shown by how they have a lot of their traditional things that are important to them, but also, like the graduation rag is all mucked up from the dishwasher, and the hide from the elk is scratched up because he hasn't done that so much, right?
Yeah. Well, and they talk shit and make fun of their heritage, but then they're still doing a sweat. So, I mean, I don't know. We do that too. I make fun of German stuff all the time, and I still love doing German shit. And we don't really make fun of Irish stuff, but on occasion.
Yeah. Hey, everybody needs a little heat.
Yeah. I mean, it makes it more, I don't know. It's okay, I think, to...
It's okay for things to be complicated, I think.
Yes. And to be grateful for your heritage, but also be able to kind of laugh at it sometimes and say, oh, this is, look how ridiculous we used to be.
All right. So, what do you think of the story? Let's go into that. Why don't you start?
Well, I absolutely loved it. I have this. So this is my second novel that I've read by him. I read My Heart is a Chainsaw, I think a year ago, and I bought the second book in that series to read, and I never got around to it. I should have picked it up right away. And now I'm like, oh, I don't really remember the first one well enough that I can jump into the second one. So I'm like, eh. But this one, I really, really enjoyed it. Like I said, it took me a little bit. I stumbled through the first couple of chapters, just getting used to his writing style. And I think at one point I even said to you, like, there was some sentence, I had to read it 3 times, and I finally just gave up and moved on. But the story itself was great. I enjoyed all the characters. I thought the humor was perfect, a perfect balance to the horror. And of course, there was some good gore in this, which just made me so happy. It's been a minute since we've had any gore in any of our reads. And
we really do need to read some splatterpunk.
We do. Yeah.
I want you to say, a little too much gore.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed this. I Oh, actually, no, that's not true. I also read.
It's not true. I didn't like it at all.
No, no, I also read I Was a Teenage Slasher very recently, and I got a wonderful personalized note in that because one of the main characters' name is Amber. So I was super excited when I had him sign it. I was like, oh my God, this is like the first time I've had my name as a main character in a book. Yeah, so this is the third novel I've read by him, and I just love his writing. So I'm going to read it all. I'm going to just devour. Luckily, he's a prolific writer, so I have a lot I can read. But this one had been on my TBR for a long time, so I'm really glad I finally got it off my TBR and into my favorites pile. What about you?
I really liked it. Do I want to say it was my favorite? I'm not sure, but for this season, it might be a top 3. I also tend to favor books that I have just read because they're like so fresh in my mind. But the ultimate compliment for this book that I think I can give is that it has definitely influenced my own writing for a writing group. Not that I'm trying to write like him, but he just had such like the character voice was just so well honed and so well done that it has pushed me to add a little more of a unique voice to my narrator. It's also like first person speaking about a big event in the past, so there's that similarity. So I'm trying to like put in a little more style on that. And also what's cool is I knew going into reading him that he was a big horror author, which can really, all I knew is that he published a lot of books. So that
were you worried he was going to be a Stephen King?
I mean, I've read enough now that I have learned that like being prolific doesn't mean anything other than that you write a lot, because you can be a really good prolific writer, but you can also, be a prolific writer who just does okay and just like wants to get stuff out quickly. There's a huge range, but he is a prolific and very careful, very good writer. This was great. I was thinking about it in comparison to The Fisherman, which we did an episode on, and I love The Fisherman, but that was very much like, I feel like it was kind of like literary on the nose, because it was like grieving men fishing in the Catskill Mountains. It's like, that's just like, that's literary ground right there, where this is almost a little more naturally literary, I guess. Like it's a good mix of pulp and a very cool style of writing, I guess.
Are you saying it's not as highbrow, but still very well written?
Yeah,
like
maybe.
It doesn't come across as like literature.
Yeah, Fisherman was definitely like a very well crafted literary work, which I love it for. But it still feels like, I felt like, oh, I'm reading literature, where this just is just a really well crafted voice where I didn't necessarily feel like this is literature, but like this is just really good stylistic writing, and I really enjoyed it.
I have a way you could say it. So
okay.
So The Fisherman could be horror-esque literature, whereas The Only Good Indians could be seen as literary horror. Does that work?
Maybe. I don't know. Let's say it works.
Okay. Works for me.
Yeah. Or, you know what I'd say? The Fisherman is literature with horror seasoning, and this is horror with literary seasoning.
Okay. Why do I feel like you're turning to food?
Because I'm hungry.
Oh, God.
But yes, I mean, this was great. I definitely want to read some more Stephen Graham Jones. I'd be happy to do more episodes of him on the podcast. And
Well, he just came out with the Buffalo Hunters.
That's a great name.
Sorry, Buffalo Hunter.
Yeah, that's a great name.
Yeah, it's been getting good reviews.
And it's interesting too. We've said this a few times, so I won't go on about it too much, but we did see him give an interview alongside Bryden Evanson at the Portland Book Festival last year. And I was going in not having read Stephen Graham Jones. So I was like, oh, he's just some random dude. And he gave a good interview. I was like, oh, he did a good job, but I hadn't read him. So now I have that, like, now that I've actually read a book, it's, I can kind of like retcon that memory and pretend that I knew why he was so cool.
Yeah, that's where I got him to sign I Was a Teenage Slasher, because it had just come out. And then I also got him to sign this one. And if you go onto our Instagram, you can see I posted his elk drawing on our page. Yeah.
I should look at that.
God damn it. God damn it, Dan. Wait, I forgot. What's your name now?
Dire Dan.
Dire Dan. Oh, I almost forgot.
I'm checking that out.
Yeah. Maybe we should read I Was a Teenage Slasher so we can come up with a nickname for me. Because I don't know of any other books with Amber.
But you didn't like it that much.
Yes, I did.
Okay,
I did.
Your criticism was there wasn't enough slashing in it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yes, we don't have to get into it, but it's called I Was a Teenage Slasher, and he didn't really start slashing until I want to say halfway through the book. So it was a slow burn. It was fine. It was more about the character building and the fact that it was like from the slasher's perspective. And I did really like the book, but I just was under the impression there would be a lot more slashing, and I was disappointed in that aspect. But I don't know.
I'm going to write a story called I'm a Teenager Slashing, and it's in present tense, and he just slashes one victim to the next. I dedicate it to you.
I guess that it's like, don't judge a book by its cover, right? Is a perfect example of that, because I was like, ooh, slasher. And it is, but...
And it seems like Jones, this is definitely like the literary seasoning here, right? And more than seasoning. I mean, he's a gifted writer. I don't want to be like saying, oh, it's kind of good. But it seems like from this exposure of The Only Good Indians that he definitely plays around and fights against expectations, and isn't just trying to write like a genre story, which he may have because he's written so much. He probably has got some just straight up fun genre stuff. Go check it out.
Well, all his stuff is like slashers that I've read.
I think he has werewolves and stuff. He said something about werewolves in an interview.
Yeah. And also with I Was a Teenage Slasher, it's autobiographical. Not the slasher parts.
Wait.
But the character.
Not autobiographical for Stephen Graham Jones.
Yes.
I'm guessing. Wait, what?
Yes.
No, autobiographical mean it happened.
Well.
But that was real.
Well.
Semi-autobiographical.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
You're going to land our man in jail.
No, he was saying it's based off of his experiences growing up in small town Texas. And I think he even said that it's the same town that he grew up in, or a similar name for the town that he used. But yeah, he based it on his life minus all the slashing parts, but just the vibes that he had growing up.
Cool.
Anyway, before we get into what we're reading right now, I did want to bring up another book that is about Native women, and it's called The Sisters of the Lost Nation. It's by Nick Medina, and I was looking him up, and it said like he's like really interested in Native American culture and stuff. So I'm not sure if he's a white dude writing if it's a white person writing it.
I'll just do a quick Google search.
I did.
Oh. Doesn't tell you?
I don't know. I mean,
a Chicago native who's an enthusiast of local and native war.
Yeah.
Not war, native lore.
I'm assuming that means he's not. But anyway, I read this book, I think last year or so, and it was very good. It's about a sister, or two sisters, one of whom goes missing from the casino on the reservation, and the other sister's looking for her. And it's very tragic. It covers the plight of Native women very well, and it's a horror, so it fits. And I suggest reading that one if you liked this, if you like the style. Honestly, I haven't really read any other Native American horror, so I can't.
We have
really
some short stories called what? Never Whistle at Night.
Never Whistle at Night. We do have that, and I think I have something else on the shelf. I can't remember though. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. And then also, because I'm a history buff, a really good, because I haven't really read a whole lot of American history. I have, but I tend to focus on the Civil War, so it doesn't really do a lot for Native history. But Howard Zinn wrote A People's History of the United States. In the very beginning, he talks about Columbus coming and meeting Native Americans, and just how twisted our view of what happened has been taught to us in schools. And that's a great book at an alternative view of history from different perspectives.
It'll make you mad, but it'll also inform you, so it's worth it.
Yeah, and those were two things that just kind of generally popped into my head while reading this as things that I would want to suggest outside of more Stephen Graham Jones.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So what am I reading right now? Well, folks, I am still reading Moby Dick, and I am not happy about it. I was listening to it the other night and I was like, fuck this. I'm DNFing it.
Are you really? Because it's like one of those things you're doing because it's like a thing, right? So
I kind of feel like I'm supposed to. I'm like 60% done with this book. I'm barely halfway.
Then you can really
still
hate
have
on
like
it.
8 hours of listening to this book. And it's just racist. It's boring. It's animal. It's horrible. Like they're talking about cutting up whales. And
Is there every now and then like a beautiful line? I don't know if you read that way, but sometimes I'm just like breath taken away with some prose.
No.
Okay.
No, I don't like it. I really don't like it. So I'm technically still reading it, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to DNF it because I started listening to Shirley Jackson, A Rather Haunted Life, which is a biography on Shirley Jackson. Our next book for the book club is The Road Through the Wall, which was her debut novel. And I love Shirley Jackson. She's my favorite author. So I wanted to make sure that I'm well prepared to talk about how awesome she is. And I have already found out that she was born in the Bay Area. And yeah, I'm like, hell yeah, girl, I love it. I mentioned before that I started reading Mallrats. That's Maul, but it also takes place in a mall. So it's a pun. Is that a pun? No. Mallrats, but it's...
Isn't it just a play on words?
Is it play on words? I don't remember what that...
Isn't that a pun though?
That's what I'm...
I don't know. It's a cool title though.
Yeah, it is. And I'm
Maul.
mall,
Rats.
like I'm mauling you.
Of course, Amber likes
at
this.
The mall. Yeah. This is by Ivy Tholine, and I'm tempted that next season we read.
I think we should. You love it.
Well, I have a couple more. I have like 2 more of her novels that I haven't read yet. One of which I couldn't get, but I might have us read the first of a two-parter.
Cool.
The only problem is that, at least as of right now, you can only get her books on Amazon. Unless you're around us and you can find it at Powell, the one book at Powell's, but it's all on Amazon, which I don't like not having any other option. But I love her writing. So this one's just a slasher, kids in a mall, and it takes place in the 90s. So it's just peak. I love her writing. She's self-published. It's really good. That's it, actually. That's all I'm reading right now.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, I've been really focused on Mallrats. So I've read more than half of it in like less than a week, which is pretty good for me since I feel like I have not been able to sit still and actually like physically read a book for a while. So yeah. What about you? What are you reading?
I ain't reading shit.
Well, there you go.
I read The Only Good Indians because, it's like a 300-page proper book. And besides that, I've been doing more writing, which is a good thing because I usually read to avoid writing. So I've been writing a lot.
I guess I can't complain then.
Partly, as I mentioned, because like the writing in this book inspired me and gave me some ideas for my own work. So that's great. Just been reading this, doing that. It also, took our son down to see some grandparents. So I was out of town for a little bit.
Going down to the California.
That's right. And that was a lot of fun, but this has been my reading. And for the rest of this season, let's see, I'll just go on to that. We have, as Amber mentioned, The Road Through the Wall next, and then we will finish this full season on episode 13, Tender is the Flesh. I'm excited to read that one by Agustina Bazterrica. And
I'm going to struggle with her name. I just know it.
I'm guessing I was close-ish. I'll look it up when we actually talk about it.
I'll just pronounce it with a German accent and then just be like, that's it. I can do American, I can do a really bad Irish accent, and I can do German. That's about it.
And then we were talking about, because right now our idea is to do those 13 episodes and then kind of break for the summer because we got a lot going on and we want to read some other books. And I kind of want to read some like non-horror books that I have started but have been on pause. I know.
Whatever.
I know. It's terrible. But we also don't want to just like be radio silent for 3 months. So we're thinking about maybe doing like, I don't know, once a month
2 months
update.
Oh. No, 2 months.
Okay, 2 months anyway. But, we might do 2 or 3 updates or something like that over the summer, just talking about what we're reading. Maybe even if it's not horror, more just kind of like a casual, hey guys, what's up? Here's what we're doing in the book life, plus a little extra, but mostly about what we're reading.
And maybe what's coming up for the next season.
Yeah, we got to start thinking about that.
Talk about the books that we'll at least start with in September. Probably the first week of September, we will publish our first one for the next season. So maybe in like July or August, look for our announcement of what our first book will be. Yeah. If anyone has an opinion, you're always welcome to tell us. You can message us at our podcast email, which is dusktodonpodcast@gmail.com.
All lowercase, dusk2to, dawnpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah. Or you can DM us on our Instagram, which is dusktodonpodcast. And also our link tree on our Instagram has some resources. So let us know. I'll just finish off saying that we did just find out at the time of this recording that the Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein is coming out on Netflix in November. And I love his movies. He's such a great, fun director. Our child didn't understand when he watched the Disney Pinocchio. He's like, Mommy, why doesn't Jiminy Cricket live inside Pinocchio's heart? And I'm like, oh God, child, we are dark.
Which was in the Del Toro version. The Del Toro, and it's so good. Check it out if you haven't.
So good.
I bring that up because I'm telling Amber we should read Frankenstein in November because I have not read it, and she has read it multiple times and does not like it, or has some issues with it, it's really fun to talk about reasons you don't like classics, as you can see Amber's been doing.
I've read this book 5 times, and I read it for classes and stuff, so like I understand all the stuff. I just do not like that book.
Yeah, but October is gonna be bloody. I think it's going to be gory, slasher.
No, I have full control of October. We've decided right now, as in I have decided right now. October is my month for sure.
So I have this literary, shut up, Dan. This is October.
Save it for Christmas. Also, maybe like a Christmas slasher would be fun.
Oh, that would be cool. But you know what? That's all stuff we're going to have to figure out in the future. For now, thanks for listening. We got 2 more episodes coming at you, and we look forward to it. So thanks for listening again. All right. See you next time. You're going to keep that shit in there, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, if you've made it this far, then we didn't scare you off. Thanks for listening to Dusk to Dawn, reading horror and weird fiction.
Please rate our podcast, and if you like, follow us on Instagram at Dusk to Dawn Podcast, which is also our Gmail address. Tell us what you liked or didn't like about the show, and let us know if you have any book suggestions. See you next time. Bye.